he used to get a cobra, milk out most of the venom, and then let the cobra strike him on the tongue. And so most of the effect of the venom would go directly into the brain. Obviously, that's a really dangerous thing to do, but that's something he did because he wanted to know the effect. There's one thing about eating the flesh of a dead body, and that is just to make you go beyond disgust. But you also have to remember that if you're eating the flesh of that dead body, you're taking on some of the karmas of the body. Just as you eat anything, you eat a plant, you're taking on some of the karmas of the plant. You eat meat, you're taking some of the karmas of the animal. You drink milk, you're taking some of the karmas of the cow or the goat or whatever it is. I don't have to go to the smashan, though I go to Banganga regularly since I've cremated people there. I love going to the cremation grounds, but the cremation, the dead people come in my direction, literally above my head.
The first episode that we created with Robert Svoboda was simply an introduction to Aghora and an introduction to some of the incidents that this human being has encountered while studying Aghora with his guru, Swami Vimalananda. I highly recommend you check that episode first, because I do promise you that this one's deeper, this one's darker. This one might make you slightly uncomfortable in certain moments. I promise you this is not the last episode that we're recording with Dr. Svoboda. For more episodes of TRS just like this, make sure you follow TRS on Spotify. We're a Spotify exclusive. Every episode's available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. Before I let you slip into this one, as is the case with every single dark episode, our intention is simply to teach you to go closer to the light. All these episodes always highlight the power of meditation. If you want to begin your meditation journey, the BeerBiceps team's meditation app, Level Supermind, is now live. Make sure you go check it out. We've linked it down below. This is Dr. Svoboda, who returns on TRS. Robert Svoboda, welcome back to the Ranveer Show.
Thank you.
Such an honor learning from you in the last episode. This is the episode that's possibly going to be watched by a lot more people initially, and then I'm sure they're going to go back to the first episode. First one was about the philosophy of Aghora, what it means, what Aghori sadhus actually do, what they stand for. You spoke about how your mentor, Swami Vimalananda, is it fair to call him your mentor?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
How he met you and his initial journey into the world of Aghora. This one's a continuation, sir. Where would you like to begin?
I think the one thing that I might want to express to everyone is that Agora is a serious business, and it's not something to take lightly. Like, my hope is nobody would do this, but just going off to the cremation ground and sitting there and trying to see whether all this was possible or not is not a good thing to do. It is very important to have a mentor, to have a guru, to have somebody who is monitoring what's going on with you, because otherwise there are a lot of things that you cannot see, that you may not be able to sense, that are very subtle, but sometimes the things that are most subtle can have the greatest effect on you. I think possibly a good place to begin is to emphasize that Agora and Tantra, for that matter, these are subjects that are quite serious, and they are subjects that, if you are not careful, you can create problems for yourself. You definitely need to know that if you ever wanted to do something in this regard, you would first need to know that you were the kind of person that is aligned with this sort of thing. This is something I've known. Bones of dead animals and humans have come to me even before I got involved in this direction. And after studying Jyotish, astrology a little, I've discovered that I'm in the rakshasa Gana. That's a group of people who have an alignment with this kind of thing. So first, you want to make sure you have an alignment. And second, you need a mentor. You need a guru, somebody who can, when you start to move in the wrong direction or possibly expose yourself to something that's dangerous, will be able to bring you back, protect you, make sure that you're not permanently disturbed, because this is the sort of thing that can create permanent disturbance.
Okay. Is being a Rakshasgan a bad thing? And probably explain a little bit about Ganas also.
Yes. So Gana, the Ganapati, Ganesha. That means he's the Lord of the Ganas. The word Gana in Sanskrit just means a category.
Okay.
So there are all kinds of different categories. In Ayurveda, we have categories, and Jyotish, there are categories. But in this particular set of categories, there's the Deva Gana, and the Deva means shining one. So we use Deva to mean a god, a goddess. The Manusha Gana, Manusha means human beings, and the Rakshasa Gana. Rakshasa is a particular type of ethereal being who is more on the more tamas-filled side. Tamas is very obstinate and very and moving in the direction of feeling very comfortable in darkness. And if you were part of that gun, there's nothing good or bad about being part of one of these ganas. If you're part of the Deva Gana, in Tantra, there are three qualities of people who are attempting to work with Tantra. And that instead of Deva, Manusha, and Rakshasa, they're called Divya, Vira, and Pashu. And so that's an indication of whether a person should mostly do internal worship, external worship, or both. So Rakshasa, Manusha, and Deva is more of an indication of should you do worship that is more sattvika, that is more calm and deals with very gentle and not violent gods and goddesses? Or should you be Rakshasa, dealing with very violent gods and goddesses? You understand that violence is not something arbitrary like human violence often is. It's the violence that's a manifestation of the reality of life. Death is a violent disconnection of your life force from your body. So this reality, and a blood drinking deities, they are taking prana not just from animals and plants. They're taking prana from you. You have to offer your own prana, and you have to know how much of it you can offer so that they are satisfied, and so that you are not simply destroyed. These are cosmic forces, and they have, when they become Devatas, a connection, a portal, an opening is created between you and that reality. And you can only, if you value your life as you should, you can only go as far into that reality as you can without being destroyed, without being swept away. I like to swim in the ocean, but it's not difficult to drown in the ocean, and you have to know how far you can go, and you have to be able to feel how strong the pull of the water is. Otherwise, you'll be. And I've known people who have been killed by being swept away. It's very dangerous.
By Aghora?
Fortunately, thankfully, I have not known people who have been swept away personally, who've been swept away by Agora, but I've heard of people who have been swept away.
Who lose their minds.
Who die,
How would you die?
Well, suppose that, you could die in a good way, that you are moving into the direction of something that is total beyond you, and your awareness goes there and it dissolves, and you can't come back to your body because you can't locate it anymore. another less pleasant way would be if you get connected to some ethereal being, might be a spirit, might be a demigod or semigod, and you don't know what you're doing, and that thing sucks all of your vitality away. And this one of the first things that I learned is that if you're going to work with ethereal beings, it's your responsibility to know the rules, because they're not going to tell you what the rules are. And it is not uncommon that somebody says, "Oh, my beloved deity, please work through me." And the deity does a lot of very good work through them, but just burns right through their body. That may be the right thing for you. That may be why you were born, but it also may not be. So you need to have a clear idea of just how far you can go, what you should be doing in this lifetime, and then make it very clear to that Devata that this is the relationship we need. I can make myself available this much, but I can't let you take me over entirely, because I have these responsibilities that I have to fulfill.
Okay. In the last episode, you spoke about how you've done a few Aghori rituals. I don't know if this is a rude, straightforward question, but was there a ritual which was gruesome enough for an everyday person to think of as weird, but which was a very normal part of Aghora, which you had done?
I mean, gruesome is an interesting word, because some people will find some things more gruesome and other things less gruesome. I don't think anything that I've done has been particularly gruesome. I periodically offer my blood, but I don't do that deliberately. It so happens that whenever it is the time, and I was told this by Vimalananda, I used to occasionally offer it deliberately, but he said there's no need. When the Devata, when the deity requires your blood, she'll take it from you. So I find that happens at a moment when I'm going to do some kind of ritual, whatever it may be, and blood is required, I will cut myself, and then I just collect the blood and offer it later. So
how will you cut yourself?
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to do it. I mean, the last time I did it, there was a spool of thread and a needle, and it was just sitting right there. And I was about to start the ritual, and I happened to stick my thumb down onto the needle, and there was the needle, and I just got a few drops of blood. And he said, "You, in my case at least, you just need a few drops of blood. You don't need to be, cutting your throat and offering a tremendous amount. Just in this stage, whatever this stage is, you just need to, when something like this will happen, or I stub my toe and some blood comes out. So it's not like I'm deliberately doing it. The moment comes, the blood comes, and then I offered the blood."
Okay. What's the beginning stage of becoming an Aghori? How do you actually begin? If you're an everyday person and you know that the path is meant for you and you find a guru, I'm assuming that the first stage is actually finding a guru.
The first stage is to find a guru. And in my case, as with Vimalananda, I never wanted to go in that direction. It's just after I met Vimalananda, after he said, here's the situation. You already have these skulls. You're already moving in this direction. This is something that you need to do also. Everybody who has anything to do with Agora has a different opinion of what Agora means. So there will be some people who say you cannot be an Aghori unless you sit in the smashan all the time and you always have a skull with you and you are always only living in the smashan. Some people will say that. I'm not, and that was not what I was taught, but I acknowledge that may be what they were taught. If you go to Benares, possibly the most famous Aghori, maybe in history, is named Kinaram. He lived about, I think, 300-ish years ago. And he still has a stele. He still has a location. They're in actually 2 locations now. And I met he's passed on now, but I met one of his spiritual descendants, whose name was Agoreshwara Bhagawan Ram, very great saint. And he had done a lot of sadhana in the cremation grounds, and there are of course cremation grounds not only in Benares but all in that area. There's a very fine one near Vindhyachala, but after a while, he said that because he saw people trying to follow the path that Kinaram followed, and he saw that they were not doing it very well. And then he said, let us think about what Agora really means. What it means is things that are really terrifying to you, you find a way to adapt to. And so then he asked himself, what is something that is really terrifying? And something that I would certainly find terrifying is the disease known as leprosy. Kushta, we call it in Sanskrit, Mahakushta. And so, because if you get leprosy, I mean, they have treatments now, but still they take a long time and you can still disfigure yourself. And it's a very horrible disease. And so he said, this is what is really horrible. And most people are terrified that if they serve lepers, they will get leprosy themselves. So he started on the other side of the river from Benares in Pardao. He started a leprosarium, a place for lepers to come and be treated. And he spent lots of time there among the lepers because this was something that is really terrifying to people. But he said, instead of, what's so terrifying nowadays about the cremation grounds, everybody in Benares sees the cremation grounds, but that doesn't cause everybody to change the way they think. Let's expose them to something that is really serious, that they're not exposed to every day, and make them get comfortable with that also. That, for him, was the real Agora. So everyone has Agora, for sure, is all about something that is hard to digest conceptually, learning how to digest it. But what that might be, that's going to differ from individual to individual.
Have to ask you a little bit more about Aghoris, sir. What was your initial rituals like, though? Like, what did you end up doing? Are you allowed to talk about it?
Well, I mean, there's certain things I'm allowed to talk about, but Vimalananda never encouraged. There's, Agora is a wide range of things. So, in my personal case, there is offering blood. Sometimes I offer blood. In the past, I have not done it for a long time. I've also made offerings of menstrual blood, which is a much stronger kind of offering because it is much more, it has the energy of bringing things into manifestation in this plane of existence. So working with that energy it's a strong downward into the earth element moving energy. And if you want it to have a spiritual effect, you have to make sure that you are allowing that to be offered to the earth element and then moving the energy back up in the direction of not simply getting stuck in the earth element. So that's one thing. Working with the skulls is another thing. Spending time in the smashan is another thing. Working with nasha, with intoxicants, that's another thing.
Have you done that?
I have. And for several years, Vimalananda said, I had done that before I came to India. And then for several years, he wouldn't allow me to take any. And then he started getting me back into taking intoxicants. And the idea of the intoxicant is that it temporarily changes your way of organizing your personality. It changes your perspective. And if you can, the idea is not to let yourself get carried away by whatever your personality might want you to do, but to take that focus and put it on whatever devata you're trying to focus on. And that can be a very useful kind of thing. And the third thing that I personally have worked with, and again, it's not something I deliberately did, but it's something that has come to me kind of automatically, is, one of the Sanskrit words is avesha, means allowing various things, Devatas, and sometimes other things, to enter yourself and express themselves through you.
You've experienced that?
Yes. Again, that's something definitely you don't want to do on your own. You want somebody to say, this is the direction you need to go in. Vimalananda used to do this regularly. He would call in Kinaram Aghori sometimes. He would call in a Devata like Hanuman or like Tara. And sometimes he would call in some other saint. So he would deliberately do that. I'm at a much more primitive stage. So that is something that, and he said, don't expect that you're going to be able to summon things in. They will come when it is the right time, provided that you keep yourself aligned in the right direction. And if you don't, you will find that something will come in that you'll have to deal with. And it will take probably quite a bit of time to deal with that.
Something darker.
Something darker, not even necessarily darker, something that is simply stronger than you are at that moment to deal with. May not necessarily be darker, might be very good, but might be something that you're not capable of dealing with at that point.
From the episodes we did with Rajarshi Nandi sir, I learned that these things, avesham, is a very high level of practice. So the fact that you're saying you've done it means you actually went past a lot of levels of practice.
But there are so many levels. You see, it's like one of the most important things to do is not think that you have achieved something important. Whatever you may have achieved, there's always something beyond. So and there's a giant difference between simply acting as a host for those things and being able to request them deliberately to enter your body. So the day that I'm able to do that successfully will be the day that I will think, maybe now I have actually achieved something.
Are you comfortable sharing the perspective of what it felt like for the first time with something else inside you?
Well, the first time was even before I when I was still a teenager in the U.S. And at that time, I didn't even know it was happening. I blacked out. I wasn't that I blacked out. I was not present for a while, and I came back to me, and people said, "Wow, you were talking about this and that and the other thing," and I thought, "Whoa, that's really interesting," because I don't remember any of that because I was not there.
You were practicing tantra and
No. This had nothing to do with anything other than being in a particular state where I was open to that.
Where were you physically?
I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay.
And I was a typical teenager, and I was consuming various illicit substances. And I think on that day, I just had a lot to drink.
So the alcohol actually opened up some channel.
Exactly. Without having any clue that this was going to happen.
You're carrying something from your past life.
Must be. Everybody is carrying things from their past lives. And it must be the case that I'm carrying things, because otherwise I wouldn't have this alignment with that and with the skulls and with Vimalananda and with all that kind of stuff. And, for me, Bombay is very much like a smashan, because I, with Vimalananda, cremated his father and his kaka, his paternal uncle, and I cremated him.
Wow. Okay. This changes this conversation for me a lot.
And let me just throw this in, just to, this is not, if you're meant for this kind of thing, you don't have to go looking for it. So back in November, 3 months ago, I think it was like the 11th or 12th, I was in the fort in my place in Bombay, and I had had a very nice day. I had met a kid that I had first met at his naming ceremony 45 years earlier when he was this size. So I met him again for the next time, and we talked about how to get his father to let go of a piece of land and I knew his father, and for several years, and Vimalananda had given the name to this boy. So it was great to see him again. It was nice. And I was thinking, gosh, what a nice day it's been. 8:15 p.m. The doorbell rings. I go to the door, and it's the kid who's the guard at the front of the building. And he says, "You're a doctor, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, but I haven't been practicing for a while." He said, "Well, it's not for someone who's sick. It's for somebody, we need to know whether they're dead or not." So I put on a mask, and all day long I had been smelling something dead. And I had been wondering, I looked down, I looked around, there was nothing obviously dead. I wondered, what could this be? I walked up one flight of stairs, literally directly above my head, and I realized the smell was coming from that. And there were two policemen breaking down the door. And we broke down the door. There was no electricity in the flat. So one policeman and I went in, he had a torch, and we were talking about, I don't know, whatever we were talking about in Hindi or Marathi or whatever. The kitchen, and the flat looks exactly like mine, so I know where everything is. The kitchen door has been wired shut. There's all kinds of trash on the floor. There's all kinds of trash in the bathroom area. We go into the bedroom that is literally just above my head. The trash is this thick, and there is a body that is lying there naked on top of the trash that has obviously been dead for a day and a half or two or so on.
Killed?
It didn't. There wasn't any obvious wound or anything. And he was a very antisocial kind of guy, so nobody was looking in on him. And so the policeman shifted to English to be more official, and he said, "Can this man be taken to be dead?" I said, "He can be taken to be dead." And I had to sign off on that with my medical registration. It's the one most official act that I have performed with my medical license here in India. But I mean, I don't have to go to the smashan, though I go to Banganga regularly since I've cremated people there. I love going to the cremation grounds, but the cremation, the dead people come in my direction, right literally above my head. So that doesn't happen to everybody.
Have you ever interacted more with dead bodies, like as a part of your rituals?
Not in any way to try to, for any other reason than to move them in the direction of cremating them, not to try to do any sadhana with them, because I wasn't told to. Because this is not the sort of thing you want to experiment with unless you really know what you're doing. And I am following what Vimalananda told me to do, because then I know that if I do something beyond that, I will have trouble.
What did Vimalananda say about the rituals related to eating the flesh? Are they very high level rituals? Eating the flesh off of dead bodies?
Well, it's a high level. There should be a reason to do it, because you have to understand that if you were eating, there's one thing about eating the flesh of a dead body, and that is just to make you go beyond disgust. But you also have to remember that if you're eating the flesh of that dead body, you're taking on some of the karmas of the body, just as you eat anything. You eat a plant, you're taking on some of the karmas of the plant. You eat meat, you're taking some of the karmas of the animal. You drink milk, you're taking some of the karmas of the cow or the goat or whatever it is. So there should be, and sometimes it's sometimes you might, and he never told me to do that, so I have not done that. Though I do remember that the one person that I was cremating, who was the first person that acted as a guru to me before I met Vimalananda, he lived in Hyderabad, but he happened to die in Bombay the day I arrived in Bombay, and so I cremated him. And while I was cremating him, his skull burst open, and I got sprayed with his blood. So I was not trying to consume his blood or flesh or whatever, but it came in my direction anyway. So that's always the better way to do things. rather than saying, now I am a great Aghori. I'm going to eat the brain of this person. You eat the brain of that person, you're taking on some of the karmas of that person. Will you be able to digest them? That's the question.
But what does it do to you spiritually other than taking on their karmas and getting you past disgust?
Well, it's a kind of intoxicant also.
Really?
Intoxicant means what? I mean, some intoxicants are obvious, like alcohol. You drink or you smoke ganja. You will very quickly feel a result. You eat bhang, it'll take an hour and a half, and then you'll feel the result. Some intoxicants, it will take longer to feel the result. I decided to experiment once with harital basma. Harital means arsenic trisulfide. And arsenic, it's a very good medicine. It's often used in Ayurveda when a person is very near death, but you need to keep them alive and functional for another few days. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. So I decided I need to know what it does. So I tried it for, gosh, I can't remember, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something. And that is also a kind of nasha because it makes you feel very strong. And after those 2 or 3 weeks, I started to realize, whoa, I'm only sleeping 4 hours and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I said to myself, this is too good. Anything that feels this good, there has to be some kind of, downside to it. So then I slowly weaned myself off of it without any negative. So now I know what harital will do. And if I get to the point where I need harital, I know how to take it and when to take it and so on. And there's so many things like that. Ayurveda is all about knowing guna. Guna means quality, attribute, characteristic. And guna of both karma means actions, what different actions will do, and substances, dravya. So if suppose you're eating human flesh, you have to understand that, like any kind of flesh, is a kind of intoxicant. You may not feel that it's an intoxicant, but it's affecting you in a particular way. Any kind of high protein thing is going to affect you in a particular way. It will, generally speaking, have a stimulating effect. How stimulating it's going to be is going to depend on what condition your liver is in. So if you have cirrhosis of the liver and you eat even 30 grams of red meat, you will go into a coma because that meat it has all kinds of amino acids in them. And as it goes through the process of digestion, some of those are going to turn into monoamines, which are many of the neurotransmitters in the body are monoamines. But some of them are false neurotransmitters, and those the liver filters out. But if you have cirrhosis, your liver is not going to filter them out, and then they will compete with the other neurotransmitters, and you won't be able to maintain your higher consciousness functions. Okay, that's obvious if you have cirrhosis, but suppose your liver is just, it's not you haven't damaged it to that condition, but it's still very sluggish, and you have a lot of toxins in your body, and your liver is not doing the job that it should be doing, and you eat a lot of protein, not just meat, but also a lot of dal or a lot of paneer or a lot of whatever it is that's high in protein. That protein is going to create some of these neurotransmitters that won't act in the right way. And so your brain will not be thinking clearly. And your brain is always trying to predict what's going to come next. And if it's not thinking clearly, it's not going to predict accurately what's going to come next. And then you're going to be moving in the direction that is not the correct direction for you to be moving in.
What had Vimalananda said about his perspective on eating human flesh? Had you had this conversation with him? Because
yes.
This is what the world knows about Aghoris.
Yes. He said that the useful thing to do to eat human flesh is if you know there is if you know you have the rananubandhana with that person, that you need to eat that flesh for whatever reason.
What was the word you just used?
Rananubandhana. This is a word he was very fond of. Rana means debt, D-E-B-T, debt. So rana means I mean, it could literally mean a debt, like you borrow money from somebody and you pay them back. But it also, in this context, it means a karmic debt. And anubandhana, bandha means a binding. So rananubandhana means a binding of karmic debt between two people. And what you're trying to do in this lifetime, we hope, is not create more binding for yourself, but to get rid of some of those bindings, to pay off the people you need to pay off, to let them pay you off. And you would think, well, if I owe that guy 100,000 rupees, I'll just give him 100,000 rupees and that will solve the problem. But usually it's not as simple as that. You may owe him 50,000 today. He may owe you 20,000 2 weeks from now. You may owe him 70,000 5 years from now. So it's not that you can necessarily just realize that, this is somebody I've got to deal with and I'm going to pay them off immediately. You have to try to get a clear perspective on what that relationship is with that person and how best to address it. So someone like Vimalananda had specialized in understanding Rananubandhana. The rest of us, we have to try to get a feeling for it. He had a much clearer perspective on it.
So the body he would consume would be in some way related to him?
Some way related. And that's what because he would say otherwise, yes. Suppose your guru says, I'm going to assign you the task of eating some of the flesh of everyone who comes to this cremation ground for the next 1 year. The guru has told you to do this. So whatever the karma is involved, the guru has told you to do it. So the guru is going to have to manage that karma because he or she told you to do it. That's number one. So automatically, only the people will come to that smashan in front of you for you to eat them if there is some connection between the two of you. Because how many people in the world? 7.5 billion, 8 billion? But you're not going to meet 8 billion. You're not going to meet 8 million. You may not meet 8,000 people in your lifetime. You're only going to meet the people that you have some connection with.
Did you ever ask him about the taste?
I mean, I don't think he ever ate pork, but if you talk to people who were in the past, people who were cannibals, they used to, like in the South Seas, they used to describe it as long pig, as tasting a lot like pork. So, I mean, when I was up until I was 20, I used to eat meat all the time, so I know what pork tastes like. And if you spend any time in a cremation ground, it will smell like barbecue. And so I have a clear idea of what it tastes like, even if I haven't eaten human flesh myself.
Are there Aghoris who can't get themselves to actually do that?
Probably.
Okay.
Though that would be, if there was someone, I mean, I don't want to speak theoretically, but I imagine if you had a guru and the guru knew that one of his or her disciples was reluctant to do that, that would probably be exactly what the guru told them to do. Because the whole point of Agora is going beyond that.
Okay.
If it was somebody who said, Guruji, I have come here to eat human brain, Guruji would probably say, forget the human brain, you need to go eat feces. It's something like whatever it is that is the thing that you most want to avoid is the thing you have to look at in Agora.
Feces consumption is a thing in Agora?
Yeah. Maybe at some point, for some person at some time.
Have you heard anything about it from Vimalananda?
Well, he said that the point of doing this is to be able to understand that, I mean, in particular, consuming your own feces. It is you. It has come out of you. And you, if you are serious about not discerning, not saying this is good and this is bad, then you need to at least be able to taste it and acknowledge that has come out of you. It is part of you.
Oh, wow. And okay, when you meditate or you pray, you have some sort of spiritual progress, and all these rituals in the world of Aghora also lead to some form of spiritual progress.
Because you're still praying, you're still meditating, you're still reciting mantra, you're still And your focus always should be that it is not you doing it. It is the deity acting through you.
There's a couple of questions I have. One's the obvious one about the health angle here. And I know a lot of listeners have that question when you're hearing things about eating feces and eating human flesh. There's got to be some health angle for the Aghoris.
Yes.
So what, does it affect health?
Well, it certainly can. But that's the whole point of it, is not to think that you're a great Aghori and to go start doing that, because that's you doing that. There's a big difference between you doing it and you being in a particular state where something else is doing it. And this is not anything, it used to be called multiple personality disorder. I think it's called dissociative integration disorder or something like that. But the point is that there are certain people who they have more than one personality. But in some of these personalities, like one personality will be allergic to something, literally allergic. They'll come out with hives or something, and another personality will not. So how can you explain that one way of organizing, you react to one substance, and another way of organizing, you react to something else? So, I mean, that's in just people who are very damaged, no doubt. But it's the same process by what, if you have a different personality inhabiting you at a certain point, you can consume things that are ordinarily would not be good for you. But then you have to make sure that, in fact, it is that personality that's consuming it and not something else.
You need to have the Avesham
Yes.
activated.
Yes.
Which is the deity acting through you.
Yes.
Okay. The second question I have here is that I read a book, Aghori, by someone called Mayur Kalbag. It was a fictional take on Aghoris. What he kept highlighting was that Aghoris are not scary. It's actually very positive interacting with them. And the second thing he highlighted was that they're spiritually very, 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 very powerful. Amongst like possibly the most spiritually powerful beings on this planet. What do you have to say anything about that?
I would certainly say that anyone who really seriously, genuinely follows the path of Agora is going to, even if they start off being very harsh, they're going to move in that, because that's the whole point of Agora. The point of Agora is not to remain in a state of being ugra, of being terrifying. The point is to digest that, to go beyond it, to get to a point where there is peace, where there is samatha, where there is even-handedness, equal-mindedness. In the Gita, it says that Krishna says the same thing, that a person who has really good equanimity, samatha, they will look at a saint, they will look at a dog, and they will look at someone who eats dogs, and they will look at them exactly the same. They will not say the saint is great, the dog is a dog, and the eater of dogs is a horrible person. They will say this is all the manifestation of reality. The karmas are manifesting in front of me. I see this, I see the saint, I see the eater of dogs, I see the dog, but ultimately it is all the play of the karmas, the play of Maya. And so it's the whole point of Agora is not to get stuck in that, not to get stuck in eating dogs. Some people eat dogs. But are you, if you, it's one thing to do it, your guru tells you to do it to the point where you become completely equanimous with that, then you don't need to do it anymore. If you get stuck with, oh my God, dog is very tasty, and I'm going to show everybody that I'm a dog eater, then you get stuck in that reality. There's no, Agora is not about being stuck. Agora is about de-sticking yourself from all of your attitudes and your disgust and the things you crave, and both raga and dvesha.
The question I have here is, I'm sure a lot of spiritual seekers take up the path of Agora for faster spiritual progress, and obviously because they've been drawn to it inherently. How long do these people actually take to achieve enlightenment? And I'm sure it's different for different people. But I'm assuming it would be like a 5, 10, maybe 20-year journey of being an Aghori.
But why only 20 years? What if it's several lifetimes? We don't know.
Wow. Okay.
We don't know. I mean, I continuously go back to the stories of Jnaneshwar Maharaj, because after meeting Vimalananda in Pune, just a couple of weeks later, we went to Alandi, which is where Jnaneshwar's samadhi is, and we did puja to it. Back then, you could do puja to his samadhi. Now there's too many people and they don't allow you. But back then, you could sit at the samadhi, and it was great. And there was, Jnaneshwar wrote his commentary on the Gita, technically called the Bhavartha Deepika, but everybody calls it the Jnaneshwari. And he wrote the Amritanubhava, which is a very beautiful thing all about reality. And he wrote something called the Changdev Pasheshti, the 65 verses to Yogi Changdev. And Changdev was a yogi who was a very tough guy, and he used a cobra as his, as a whip, and he rode on a tiger. He was a serious character. But he discovered early in his life that he would not meet his guru for 1,400 years. So he thought, well, how is this going to work out? Suppose I die and I get born in some family that's not interested in spirituality. I may miss the guru. Best thing is I will stay alive. So he did his yoga. Every 100 years, death would come looking for him. He would go into samadhi. Death would not find him in the body. That moment would pass. He would come back, live for another 100 years. And when he finally heard about Jnaneshwar and his brother Nivrittinath, who was Jnaneshwar's guru, and the brother Sopan and the sister Muktabai, he wrote them a letter. And Jnaneshwar wrote him a letter back, the Changdev Pasheshti. And Changdev came with his disciples, and they were all saying, Jaya Bam Bam Shankara, Jaya Shankara. And he was riding on the tiger. And from a distance, meaning they could see him with clairvoyance, and they saw, oh, Changdev Maharaj is coming to visit us. We must go and meet him, but so we can show him good Atithi Satkar, show him, the guest is, we're going to respect him as a guest. So they were sitting on a wall, and because they had the capability they had all kinds of siddhis, they made the wall fly to Changdev, and they met him there. And they saluted one another, and Changdev recognized his guru, who was Jnaneshwar's sister, age 14. So 1,400 years over here, 14 years over here, she initiates him, and that takes care of the thing. But he had to wait 1,400 years. There's nothing like time. There is, if you start thinking about time, oh my God, I've only got 20 years. You're going to cut a corner somewhere, and something not so great is going to happen. You're going to look up you're barreling down the highway, and you're going to look at something over there, and you're going to run into something. So Vimalananda used to say, do not ever think you're something special. Do not think about how long it's going to take. Decide what you're going to do. And that applies to anything, not just Agora. I mean, how many people really are going to follow, are meant to follow the path of Agora? Not so many. But everybody is meant to follow the path of moving in the direction of connecting to reality. And so, however long that takes, always remember that's your goal.
You mentioned ganja as something that was used. I'll tell you what, all of India smokes weed now, especially younger India. Everyone smokes weed. I'll be surprised to find a college that doesn't have some weed consumption in India, which is why I always find it tricky to speak about weed on the show, because I've been there myself. And every time I would find the internet validating something about weed, I would be more inclined to smoking it. So that's not my intention behind asking you this. I do not wish to validate the stoners who are listening to this podcast. And in saying this, what's the purpose of marijuana in Hinduism, in spiritual growth, and in Aghora specifically?
Well, I think we should first remember that cannabis grows all over the country. It grows wild. I spend a lot of time in Uttarakhand nowadays. It grows wild in Uttarakhand. So it is a plant. In Ayurveda, it's a very useful thing, especially for people who have whose digestive capability is disturbed in some way. Especially, like, for example, you've had parasites many times. So that it is a very good medicine if it's prepared correctly with other things added to it and consumed in the right amount.
Does it still get you high?
If you're eating it that way, usually not. But it's also something that has been traditionally used. It's been a traditional offering to Lord Shiva for a long time because he takes intoxicants. I remember, okay, we're talking about probably almost 40 years ago, I had gone to Ujjain. Ujjain, one of the Jyotirlingas, is there, Mahakaleshwara. And so this was almost 40 years ago. Back then, there was not Jyotirlinga tourism and all the kind of stuff we have nowadays. So it was evening. There was almost no one in the temple. I walked into the temple, and there was the pujari, and he was covering the linga with a thick paste of bhang. And he was decorating it with some peanuts, some mungfali. It was very beautiful. I sat there, and then after a while of sitting there, and I was repeating a couple of things, he gave me a nice piece of bhang as prasad off the linga. So this is something that is traditional. Now, what would that bhang be meant for? That word bhang comes from the Sanskrit word bhanga. Bhanga actually means to break. What is it supposed to do? Break the connection between your awareness and your ordinary physical existence. So the point of taking bhang, for example, is to sit and meditate and allow your awareness to become the awareness of Shiva. The difference between bhang on the one hand and ganja or charas on the other hand is that bhang takes a longer time to come on, and it lasts for a lot longer time. Charas and ganja, they come on much more quickly, and the effect goes away more quickly. But charas and ganja are meant for the same thing. But it's also the case that whether you're taking any form of cannabis, the thing is that whatever is in your mind, that will continue to stay in your mind. So the only reason, and Vimalananda emphasized this repeatedly, the only reason to take these is to take them and then to sit down and meditate, to sit down and chant, to sit down and worship the fire or the water or whatever element you're worshiping. That is the only reason to take them, because otherwise they will simply get you more connected to whatever kind of thing you are addicted to.
Food or sex.
Whatever it may be, absolutely. Food or sex or sitting around and laughing at stupid YouTube videos or movies or whatever it may, anything.
This is where a lot of people get it wrong as well. They only associate pot with being a spiritual thing, but then they use it as an excuse to do non-spiritual things when they're high.
An excuse is still an excuse, no matter how good or bad the excuse may be. So whatever you use it for, it's going to encourage you to keep using it for that purpose.
How often would sadhus get stoned in order to meditate? Every day?
Some sadhus smoke every day.
Is that correct?
Correct is a big word. If some sadhus, that may be part of their sadhana. They may say, every day, this is what I need to do. I am making ganja my sadhana. Some sadhus may not do that. It depends on the person. But it has to be something that you know why you're doing it deliberately. And sometimes, of course, Vimalananda would, he would also use it as a way of experimenting with, somebody comes and thinks they can do something, and he would let them try something out and see whether they could do it or not. I remember once, we used to have a friend who, I don't know what his name was. We called him China Sert. I think he was originally or part Nepali or something like that. So he looked vaguely Asian or Chinese. And he was in Sayan Koliwada. And he was regarded as being kind of a dada of some kind, of a tough guy. And he was a nice guy overall. A couple of times he had brought Vimalananda a chillum that had some kind of extra visha, a little extra poison in it. Sometimes, like people into their chillum, they will add datura. Datura, if you go to Benares, for example, you go to Vishwanath, you can buy datura seed pods and offer them to Shiva. That's very dangerous. Datura, for some people, even one seed might kill them.
Have you tried?
Datura? I have tried datura. I don't like it. It depends. I mean, some people use datura, but I remember asking a shaman in South America about datura. He said, yeah, it's very useful, especially for finding things that have been lost. But he said she's a very jealous plant, meaning that once you start working with her, it's very hard to escape from it.
Yeah, you read all sorts of stories about datura on the internet where they say that there's also a presence of a black dog in everyone's hallucinations. Is that true? And that's why they call it devil's weed.
That I don't know, but I do know people who have taken it, enough to really have it take over their awareness. They say that the it will look exactly like reality, except there will be some fuzziness at the edges. That's the only way you can tell it's
What
not
had
reality.
happened to you?
Well, I just took a small amount, and I didn't take it internally. I smoked it, and so I could tell. I mean, you can kill yourself with it, and people become permanently insane from it. So I could tell that it was a very poisonous thing. You have to know what. I feel good about arsenic. I didn't feel good about datura. You have to know what poisons you feel good with.
You had done this with Vimalananda?
I actually did it afterwards.
Okay. What do you
He
remember?
never used datura. He would use other things. I mean, once he gave me some snake venom that had been prepared in a particular way.
Really?
That was very interesting. That had an effect for like 24 hours. I can't even describe what it was like, but it was just very interesting. It was snake reality.
Snake reality.
Yeah, it's like you were seeing the world from the eyes of a snake. It was very unusual.
Which is what?
That's why I say I can't. I mean, it's hard to. You can if you could get into the body of a reptile and see through the eyes of the reptile. It's like you're seeing. Reptiles are not emotional things. They're just very basic reality connected to this is what I'm going to do. There's nothing about emotion. It's just very matter of fact.
Very much like an Aghori.
Very much like an Agori. So yeah, I mean, so anyway, there was this China set, and he had brought a couple of times, not just once, a couple of times he had brought a chillum to Vimalananda that had some other kind of poison in it. I don't know what it was, but Vimalananda smoked the chillum, and China set got the effects of the poison. So I would have thought that once would have been enough to convince him, but he did that twice. After that, he realized that was not a good idea. So he would just bring, standard charas with him. So I remember, I think probably because it is my habit to self-importance is a problem that I've had my entire life. So I was probably thinking that, yes, I know how to handle this charas. So whichever it was, we were going to drop China set back in Sayan Koliwada. And this was, of course, 40 years ago. And there was not the Eastern Freeway, and there was not, there was the chillum, and we all smoked it. And then Vimalananda said, okay. And we went down to his car, and then he handed me the keys and said, now you drive. So now I've just smoked this chillum with all this charas in it. And now I was driving in Bombay anyway, but now it's a bigger challenge to drive. And to, both he and China said are expecting that I'm not going to crawl down Muhammad Ali Road, but that I'm going to drive like I know what I'm doing. So now I have the pressure of them both paying attention to me and the pressure of the charas, which is, and so, it was an educational experience and a good reminder not to think too much of my capabilities. And it was a good lesson. And thank God, Vimalananda was along with me, but I got there and everything was fine. And Chinasat was duly impressed, and so that worked well.
I'm still stuck on the snake venom, so gotta understand a little bit more about it because
Well, Vimalananda, he used to, and I know there were people who used to do this, but I never met anyone who did it except him, and he never volunteered to show me how to do it, and I'm not willing to do it otherwise. He used to get a cobra, milk out most of the venom, and then let the cobra strike him on the tongue. And so most of the effect of the venom would go directly into the brain. Obviously, that's a really dangerous thing to do, but that's something he did because he wanted to know the effect. He made it a point to try things out just to the point where he knew what the effect was. And then he said, if I do it anymore, there's too much danger that I'm going to become habituated to it. Then he would drop it and move on to the next thing. But he was always trying new things whenever there were new things to be tried.
That's a part of being an Aghori?
For him, that wasn't a part of being an Aghori. And I believe that is very much a part of being an Aghori, because it's things that come to you. You need to know what they are. You need to know, as he put it, it's the law of the jungle. It either kills you or you kill it. Every time I used to, his favorite intoxicant was scotch. And when he would drink scotch, he would become more and more sharp, and what he would talk would become more and more sophisticated and abstruse.
The reason I'm hesitant about having this free-flowing conversation with you is there's a lot of people who watch this and think that drinking scotch equals spiritual growth.
And one of the first things that happened after Agora was first published almost 40 years ago in the US is somebody sent a letter to the publisher. Back then we had to use snail mail. And the letter said, please send the mantra for controlling alcohol. Do not do this unless you have someone guiding you. And that was very much his point.
I believe in Tantra of any form, when you're using intoxicants, there's a huge ritual that happens upon those intoxicants before you consume them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Which may have an effect on your body, it may have an effect on the intoxicant.
And that's why I think I said earlier, but if not, I'm saying right now, do not go out and try this stuff. If you're meant to do it and you have the intention, someone will come to you, maybe in this lifetime and maybe not, and someone will tell you the right things to do. And that may not be what you imagine. Yeah. You may be thinking, I will start drinking scotch. And the guru will come to you and say, under no circumstances drink alcohol ever. And then what? Then your idea will no longer, you will either have to think, oh my God, but I know that I could achieve this without, but number one is you need a mentor. You need a guide. You will get lost otherwise. Many people have gotten lost. Many people are getting lost. Nowadays, for example, people are taking ayahuasca. And so many people think they have become shamans and they can distribute ayahuasca. And so many people think that they can take ayahuasca and they know what they're doing. But that doesn't mean they know what they're doing. This applies to anything that will disconnect you from your current present time reality. Only take it if you have a guide. And it has to be a legit, not just somebody who thinks they're a guide, somebody who is a real. How will you know if they're a real guide? Well, you need to be able to find that out. How will you find that out? That's a good question. That's something, there is no one pariksha, no one test you can use to figure out whether someone is legitimate. You have to be able to, or as Vimalananda used to say, suppose you want to know whether some swami or some sadhu or some yogi is legitimate. It's up to you to be able to have the perception of them. Don't expect that they are going to, because anyone will say, I have achieved this. Whether or not they've achieved that, you don't know, and possibly they don't know. But he used to say that, any fool can tell the difference between the smell of the gutter and the smell of attar. But just because you can know what is the difference between badbu and khushbu, between something that smells that is a stench and something that is a fragrance, that's all that means. After you have learned a little bit, you'll be able to tell whether that fragrance is rose or jasmine or agar or whatever it may be.
Okay.
But even then, just because you know it's rose, that doesn't mean you will know whether it's the highest quality of rose or whether it's rose plus rose geranium or something else. You have to have enough experience to know what that person is about before you personally can conclude that what they're saying is accurate or not.
We had an expert on Zoroastrianism on the show, and he spoke about how even today in Parsi fire temples, they consume homras, which is actually somras, and it's derived from dry twigs that you find in northern Pakistan and Afghanistan. Was somras a part of what you consumed in Aghora?
Soma, or in the ancient Avesta, the ancient Iranian language, is called Homa instead of Soma because they use H instead of S. I follow what Vimalananda said. And what Vimalananda said was that the original Soma was something that could only be seen by very, very advanced people. And that means it was invisible to you and me. People like you and me, we could use something that would have possibly a similar effect on us, but only if we knew how to prepare it and what mantra to use and what was the context to use it in. And so the sticks they're talking about, most likely they're talking about either ephedra or something, sarcostemma, I think sometimes they use for that. And some people believe that was, in fact, Soma. Vimalananda believes something else. And he said that the different people will find that different substances prepared in different ways will have an effect of Soma on them. And what's the effect of Soma is that your awareness should go into the astral world and you should be able to connect to the Devata that you're trying to connect to. So that's why he drank scotch, because that allowed him to go into the astral world. But that is not going to cause everybody to be able to do that. In fact, only a tiny number of people will be able to do that. Otherwise, most people will just get drunk. And when I first went to Benares to the Kinaram Aghori place, that's what I saw. There were a couple of skulls, a moth-eaten tiger skin, and 3 or 4 people who claimed they were Aghoris lying down dead drunk. But that's not the point. The point is not to become drunk. And that's what Vimalananda would say when he drank. If you're going to drink, you have to know whether you're drinking it and you're controlling the Shakti, because if you're not controlling it, it's going to drink you. And you're going to end up pretending that you've got somewhere and you'll just be an alcoholic.
Did you interact with other Aghoris other than Vimalananda?
Very few. Baba Bhagawan Ram, for example.
What was the experience like? What did they tell you? Are they hyper intuitive? Because that's what books tell me.
A good sadhu, a good spiritual person should be hyper intuitive. And yes, that has been my experience, that they are extremely intuitive. And also, they're not trying to show off. They're not trying to demonstrate how great they are. They are doing their own sadhana, and you have come to them for whatever reason. They're hoping that you know why they came, because a lot of people, what do? They come to any Swami or Sadhu, much less an Aghori. They're not looking for actual knowledge. They're not actually looking for a sadhana, a practice to perform. They're looking to be entertained in some way. So that gets tedious after a while. And after a while, and of course, after a while, a lot of people who really have done serious Agora sadhanas, they will stop doing that. And I mean, the person who was most impressive for me in this regard was Vimalananda's, he used to call him his junior Guru Maharaj, who I met many times, and who left his body in 1993, and his samadhi is at Simhachalam, which is near Vishakhapatnam in Andhra. And Guru Maharaj had done all kinds of sadhanas in the past, but he had given them all up and was just doing Gayatri sadhana at the time that I knew him. He is, I don't know, he's the only person that I have ever run across, and there could well be others, but he's the only person I have ever run across who had a certificate from the Archaeological Survey of India. And it said, this is to certify that Jatal Sadhu Ram Vishwambar Das was found, it did not say in Samadhi, but it meant in Samadhi, was found during an excavation in Khurda Road, Taluka of Puri district of Orissa state in the year, I think it was 1905, might have been 1904.
You'd met him?
I met him many times. I stayed with him. He would only allow people to stay with him 3 days at a time. Vimalananda's foster daughter and I would go there. Sometimes I'd go on my own. My friend Dr. Fred Smith met him more than once. So he had been in Samadhi in this temple that collapsed like in the year 1701 or something like that.
Really?
And he had been in Samadhi all this time. And they were excavating the temple, and then they saw, oh my God, here's this sadhu but he's in Samadhi. We can't bring him down. So back at that time, we're talking about 1904, 1905, they had special people in Puri. And Puri is a very interesting place. They had special people who knew how to bring people down from Samadhi. So they brought him down out of Samadhi. And then, he had been in Samadhi for at least 200 years. And then there he was. He suddenly was back in his body again.
Did you ask him about those times?
He would, we did, but he would never, he would just say, yeah, I remember how things were in London 400 years ago. But you could never tell. You could only tell he was serious when you knew he was being serious. Apparently, he had lived on air only after he came out of Samadhi, air only for like 20 years. And he was living in a tree. Then he started living on a rock and was taking 1 teaspoon of water at a time. As long as I knew him, and that was 10 years. I met him first in 83, and then he left his body in 93, or it might have been 82, maybe 11 years. And I visit him at least once a year, sometimes twice. At that time, he was drinking this much milk a day, and he was drinking this much thumbs up a day. And he was not eating solid food except tobacco. And I don't mean he was chewing it up and spitting it out. I mean, he would get 2 big black leaves of Guntur tobacco, and he would tear them into strips and chew them up and swallow them. So one day I was thinking, oh my God, how is he doing this? And he made it a point to monitor everybody's thinking all times. So I just had that thought. And suddenly he said, what's the use of eating? You wear out your teeth. And he had 2 rows of teeth. I saw this many times. The front row was all worn down. The back row was all nice and...
There was a row of teeth behind his...
Yeah, I saw this many times. There it was. You only had to open his mouth and you could see it. And so he said, you wear down your teeth, and obviously he had done that before. Maybe you get some disease, maybe the food is no good, and then you wear out your digestive organs. It's better to find something really poisonous, and tobacco is poisonous. You can kill yourself with tobacco. Get something really poisonous, eat it, do internal alchemy, and then you have no problems.
Internal alchemy.
Internal alchemy.
Using yoga.
Using whatever, he never specified what it was. It was always, he would say it. And if you asked, what does that mean? And he would say something like, if you don't have any faith, don't ask, or, go away.
I was just thinking that if I was a Western podcast, I would have cross-questioned you as a skeptic, asked you, how do you know if he was truly alive? But just come to realize in India, you never know what you're going to find.
No,
Not at all. How do you explain this to your Western friends, all these things?
Well, normally I don't bring it up because people are not normally going to, it's only the people who have been exposed to enough of alternate realities, India, South America, Africa, wherever it might be, then they will understand there might be an But I mean, literally, for 10 years, whenever we were together, he would just be eating tobacco.
What were the things he was serious about? You said that he would only be serious when he spoke about some things. Like you would know when he's being serious.
Yes, and it was not, often he would just be talking about some foolish thing like, "Oh, you in America, you get your food from factories." I said, "Yes, it's all put, it goes into the supermarket." Oh, and you drink brandy. Yeah, no doubt we do. So he would talk about this kind of stuff, but occasionally something would, cause him to pay attention, and then he would let loose something that was meaningful. Like, for example, I don't know what the context was, but one day he was just looking at me, I think, or maybe at Vimalananda's foster daughter, and he said, "Do you think that if my destiny was good, that you would be able to meet me?" So his point was that, the only reason he was there was otherwise he would have been still in samadhi, wandering around somewhere else. So he had been dragged down out of samadhi, and now he was stuck here, and that's why he was meeting people. He came to Bombay more than at least once, I think twice, but mostly he stayed at Simhachalam.
Do you still get dreams of him, of Vimalananda, or deities?
Yeah. Of him, dreams not so much, but sometimes it'll be obvious. I mean, sometimes it will just be obvious that his presence is there.
Vimalananda's?
Or Guru Maharaj. Less Guru Maharaj because he has more things going on. But Vimalananda, yeah, more it's just...
Yeah. I think I've not even been able to encapsulate 1% of what your experiences are or what's even in the book Aghora, because I've read certain aspects of it and it's very deep. In fact, I think you've mentioned Emperor Akbar in that book. Would you like to talk about it in this episode? Because that's something I found extremely mind-bending.
Well, Vimalananda was very interested in history, and he was very interested in the Emperor Akbar because he was convinced that Akbar was the reincarnation of Prithviraj Chauhan, and that Prithviraj Chauhan, who had been meant to be the emperor of India, was unable to do so because of some pre-existing karmas, and then became the emperor afterwards, but in a different sharir, in a different body. And so there was a definite affinity that he had with Akbar, and he often did hazri, meaning he often allowed, or he invited Akbar into his body, and then he would speak. He would allow Akbar to speak through his body.
You witnessed this?
Many times. Yes, many times. And of course, on the one hand, it's impossible to know whether, because Akbar lived 400 years ago, it's hard to know whether it was actually Akbar or something. But having had other experiences of Vimalananda in other contexts, and having this, he did Hazri, Avesh, of many different things, and each of those personalities was strikingly different, and in the case of each of those personalities was very consistent. If this was being put on, it would be much more difficult to be so consistent, but this was extremely consistent, always the same kind of, not just what he said and so on, but at a more subtle level, the quality that one would sense of that presence. It's sort of like, being able to sense qualities of rose attar or whatever kind of attar. So qualities of personalities as they come in, and that personality definitely was always consistent and always suggested that, in fact, that personality was the personality of Akbar.
Don't you think that maybe Emperor Akbar's spirit would have reincarnated as something else? Did it?
And Vimalananda said it's certain that by this point, Akbar has had more than one birth thereafter. But this can happen even without the current version of Akbar knowing what's going on. Because it's happening from a personality. This is not easy to talk about in human speech, because it's not something that people describe characteristically in human speech. But it's a similar kind of thing on a very gross level of these people who have multiple personality disorder, and different personalities cause different things to happen in their bodies. So, and this is why Vimalananda was so emphatic about regularly doing Pitru Tarpana, which means worship of the ancestors. Because he said, everybody is being possessed by things all the time. They're just not aware of it. We get possessed by viruses. We get possessed by emotions. We get possessed by intoxicants. We get possessed by ideas, communism, capitalism, socialism, whatever kind of ism. Get possessed by religions. We get possessed by, but especially we get possessed by our ancestors. And it's easy for them to possess us because we have their genes and chromosomes. So they know how to sneak in. And most of them died having some cravings. And they are very strongly encouraging those cravings in us. Pitru dosh. So the fact is that wherever Akbar is, who knows how many incarnations he's had since 400, 500 years ago. But there is still some connection to that previous personality. So someone like Vimalananda, who can connect to that previous personality, can allow that personality to work through him, and that will be good if he is doing it in a good way, which he always did. That will be good for Vimalananda, and that will be good for the personality Akbar, and that will be good for whatever personality the personality Akbar currently is.
What did he try to interact with Emperor Akbar about? Did he ask him questions?
He was allowing Akbar to be present in him, and Akbar the only people that would be present when any of these hazris would happen would be people who had some kind of rananubandhana, some kind of karmic connection. And so Akbar would either allow people to ask him questions, or he would say, "You have come today because of this." And the person would say, "Yes, I have come because of this." And then they would discuss that, whatever that the implications of whatever that might be.
Do you have any inputs from what Emperor Akbar used to say about the times that he found himself in that body, which is like 80s or 90s?
Well, I mean, he used to occasionally make jokes, like, he used to ride around on an elephant. So he would, one joke he made once was, "Kya zamana aage?" What kind of age are we in? That in my times, we used to have the vahan, the vehicle, let go of its liquid, means the elephant would pee before you started off. Now we have to put liquid into the vahan, into the vehicle, before it will go anywhere.
What was it like for you seeing all those interactions? You could tell it's from a different time. Like,
well, and it was also, I had also had experience because, Vimalananda was trying to expose me to all kinds of things. So, he would expose me to people that he knew who were possessed. And then, so you could tell, I mean, with certain types of possession, you can tell just from their eyes when the possession comes onto them or not. In fact, in the household where he was living, there were two people living in the household who would get possessed occasionally. So it was kind of like living in a in a cremation ground because there were these spirits that would periodically take over these two people. So, I mean, just by virtue of that happening, there was already, some awareness that people could be taken over by things all the time. So then when it came to it was very obvious the difference between, that kind of possession and the possession of a deity. It was a little less obvious with being when he was possessed by Kinaram Aghori or by Shahanshah Akbar, because they had been human. Deities, many of them have never been human. Some have been, but most of them, and especially the more advanced deities, they have been able to maybe incarnate as humans or take over humans temporarily, but they're not particularly human. Kinaramji and Shahanshah Akbar, they were humans, so it was easier to interact with them than to interact with some devata who doesn't really connect to human reality.
But they would take over the body and answer people's questions.
Yes.
Any other purpose?
That was the main thing.
Okay.
And the main thing was, suppose Vimalananda knew that he had a Runanubandhana with somebody. And suppose the karma that he knew that he had to do with that person was some karma he didn't particularly want to take on. Then he would request something else to come through him if that thing was willing to take on this particular karma. So he would confirm whether that was the case. And then that thing would come and deal with the karma. And it was being done through him. So that was assisting that karma to be worked through. And that whatever was coming through him would be doing the main karma. The person would get their result. That whatever was coming through him would get a good result. The karma would be taken care of. Vimalananda would have a good result. Everybody would be happy.
So many more questions. So this is like a never-ending conversation. I have got a bit of an intuition to stop, like maybe a little abruptly.
Well, there really is. I mean, there is no limit, and this is something that Vimalananda emphasized over and over again. There is no limit to knowledge, and here in this very country, Bharatavarsha, India, there have been people who have been focusing on trying to understand reality from all its perspectives, and they've been focusing for thousands of years. And the amount of things that have been understood and experienced are so far beyond the capabilities of one human being to even get an idea of the magnitude of, much less understand everything. He used to say, the rishis, they were, we call them rishis, but he liked to call them Mahanubhavi. That Anubhavi means someone who experiences. Mahanubhavi, somebody who is a great experiencer, who spends hundreds of years, maybe like Guru Maharaj did, thousands of years, experiencing things, seeing how time and space change, seeing how human beings change, trying to figure out the best way to cause harmony as much as possible everywhere. Maybe a good place to stop for right now is to quote something in Hindi that Vimalananda liked to use to quote. And my Hindi is not very grammatical, but I'm going to try to quote it anyway. Jahan nahi pahunchte Ravi, wahan pahunchte Kavi. So where the sun will not be able to reach, the poet will reach. And so that's apparently a well-known saying in Hindi. But Vimalananda went further, and he would say, Jahan nahi pahunchte Kavi, wahan pahunchte Anubhavi. So where even the poet cannot reach, the experiencer can reach. So that was what he believed, that he should always be trying to experience things, not only because it would be assisting him to learn more things, but because he was trying to allow all of these devatas and the supreme reality itself to experience through him, so that alignment between him and the supreme reality could just become more and more and more well-textured and rich and rasavanta, juicy.
One final question for you. This is something I asked you earlier in the show, but then we digressed a little bit. We spoke about aveshams and how the deity enters you. You said you've also experienced it, and I'm sure possibly recently you may have experienced it. And by recent, I mean in the last 5 to 10 years. Do you have a memory of what it feels like for the deity entering you, or does your mind just kind of erase that memory? Or what does it feel like from your perspective?
Well, again, this is something that's not easy to describe, but it's the way that I like to think about it is, suppose you have a computer, not so much a phone, but a computer. And on the computer, you may have a program or even an app, and you may be working with the app, but then you minimize the app. The app is still running. The program is still running, but it's running in the background. So that's sort of the same kind of thing. Your normal personality is still there, but it's in the background. And then you can feel that there is something else that is present there. And it is doing whatever it is that it's doing. But and as long as it's able to do that, because Vimalananda used to like to call it a spiritual vacuum. He said that if you're just filled with your own personality, there's no place for anything to come in. But if you minimize that, so it hasn't, you're not dead. All you've done is you've taken that personality, you've minimized it temporarily. And while you can keep it minimized, then there's enough of an empty space that something else can come in and be present. So if you can do that, then something else comes in and is present, and it feels like there is something there that is may be there at other times also, but you're feeling it more because you have been temporarily minimized.
But do you feel it physically in your body?
At a subtle kind of level. I mean, there definitely are people who are much more advanced at this than I am, and they will be able to actually feel it in the body, and and it will take them over, and they will do things that they could not do otherwise. I'm not at that stage. So it's just, for me, a matter of, I can certainly feel that it's present there, but it's present in a very subtle kind of way. But I don't feel any urgent need to do anything other than I know it's there. So I appreciate it coming in that much. And I mean, I have my own limitations to think about. I don't want to be overwhelmed by it.
Why do you call it into yourself?
Well, I generally, there's only really one or two Devatas that I deliberately request to come in. Otherwise, it's simply I'm requesting whatever Devata would like to be present at a particular moment when I'm sitting in a particular space. Whoever would like to be present is welcome to come and be present for whatever reason. And I don't expect them to do any work for me. I just want them to be present and to be able to experience the reality that I'm experiencing at that moment, so that they can experience that for whatever reason.
But you can do it at will?
Only in no, not at will. Only when I'm in a certain kind of frame of mind.
Okay.
So Vimalananda could do it at will, but that's the difference between someone who is at that stage and someone who is still at the kindergarten stage. That would be me.
Robert, sir, thank you. That's it. That's the end of this conversation. You have so many more podcasts in you. I want to know what happened in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s. What happened on the other continents. This is just the story of India. You have so much more to give the Indian internet. But unfortunately, we'll have to do that in September, because that's the next time you're in Bombay. Just very grateful to you for like opening up the way you did. Grateful that you're the first conversation in this space. You're not an ordinary soul for sure. I know for a fact that you're still spiritually advancing and you're way ahead of most of us. So,
But being way ahead, it does not mean that it's important to remember that there is no final, you can't get to somewhere and say that you've achieved the ultimate. There is no ultimate. And that's why the rishis live for thousands and tens of thousands of years, because they know there is no, they could dissolve and go back to the supreme reality. But if they want to maintain, and for them, it's a very, very, very subtle distinction between the supreme reality and their reality. But that distinction is still distinction. So they're always refining it and thousands of years go by. That is the real kubi, the real mahatva, the real greatness of this bhumi, this land.
why do you think this conversation happened? For you, for me, for the listeners?
I would say the moment had come where Vimalananda wanted more to be known, more people to know about what he was doing and why he was doing it. And he was always interested in working with larger groups of people. That's why he used to go to the race course, because he said gambling is a terrible karma. But the point is that you can work with many, the karmas, the rananubandhanas of many people all at once, because of them all being present at the race, many of them betting on the race. So there's a way for all of these different runas, if you know what you're doing, to be able to align themselves. So he may have runas with who knows how many people, and they may need to watch this and hear this and be connected in some way to him. And that may be permitting him to work out yet another Rananubandhana.
Did not expect such a heavy answer, but I'm grateful again to you. Thank you to him, Intelli's here, and thank you to the listeners for listening in. Do you have any last message for the audiences? I'd say read Aghora, the book. I'd begin by saying that.
I like to reread it. I think it's because there are 3 books. The first one is all in his words, and I think that I think it's a good place for anyone to begin who really wants to know about what it means, not just Agora, but what it means to really be serious about making spiritual progress. And the only thing I would like to end by saying is that whether your path is Agora or the Vedas or whatever your path is, be serious about the fact that this is your lifetime and you do not know at any moment that life could end. Be appreciative, be grateful every day that you're alive, and don't waste time. Don't get tied up in things that do whatever your responsibility is, but always take some time every day to connect as best you can to reality, to point yourself in the direction that you want to go. And that direction should be the direction of removing your limitations and connecting to what is really real, which is consciousness.
Robert Svoboda, thank you for being on the Ranveer show again. Looking forward to having you again, sir.
Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya. That was the episode for today. Not going to talk too much about how I felt about Dr. Svoboda, because there's some conversations that that you're just destined to have. I got in touch with Dr. Svoboda through a very dear mentor of mine, Kiran Khalap sir, who's been on the show multiple times. He was the one who had introduced me to Dr. Svoboda's work years ago. I do believe that if you've consumed this entire podcast, it probably means that you're very fascinated by the subject. And the knowledge within this subject was supposed to meet your mind at some point in your own journey in this lifetime of yours. That's how I look at all the deeper spiritual episodes of the Ranveer show. We package it as a dark episode, but in truth, it's a spiritual episode. Dark stories and dark concepts are truly compasses in order to guide you towards the light. Begin your meditation journey on Level Supermind. We've linked it down below. And for more episodes just like this, make sure you follow TRS on Spotify Every episode's available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. If you do know of experts just like Dr. Svoboda, and I'm 100% sure there's a countless people just like this incredible being, please let us know in the comment section down below. Dark content on TRS will never get over. We'll never stop releasing this kind of content. Someone's got to talk about these kind of topics on the internet. Thank you all for your support. Keep growing, keep meditating, and above all, keep evolving.